Welcome to a Simplex converted to a Great Western Railway Prairie tank. This is part 90, experimenting with paint. And here's the paint I'm going to experiment with. 6 tins of Phoenix Precision paints in aerosol form, Great Western Railway Loco Green, which is more than I need for the entire job, but during the course of this painting experiment I will be wasting some. I'm in the outer part of the workshop now, 24 hours after I coated the boiler in etching primer, and I'm applying the first coat of this satin finish Great Western Railway Green. Before I continue, the first mistake that I made was to not follow the directions on the can. I did not shake the can for 5 minutes. Nowhere near that, so some of the paint is spluttering out in big lumps onto the surface of where I'm painting. Normally for painting models I would buy some tins of Phoenix Precision paints from Blackgates Engineering, take them to a local automotive paint company called Autopaint Northern, and they transfer the paint into aerosols. But this time the aerosols are directly from Phoenix Precision paints, and what you see me doing here is making a primary mistake. Boilers are quite difficult to paint because they're round, and there aren't any flat surfaces. It's very easy to apply too much paint, but please remember I am doing this on purpose. A few thin coats allowing drying time in between are much better than one thick coat like this. Although at the moment it looks okay, but the next day, not only has most of the paint turned into the satin effect, there are runs and sags all over the place. What a mess. I think at this stage of the video I need to put a notice on screen. And this is a special notice to all the expert painters out there. Please do not write in to tell me how to do the job. The boiler has been painted this way on purpose, and please remember that you are watching a tutorial made for beginners to the hobby. This job looks terrible. What should I do? Should I just remove it all and start again? Probably, because I don't normally paint this badly. But first a few hints and tips and tricks that you may find useful. This wet or dry sandpaper that I'm using is 400 grit, and I've cut it into strips to make it easier to get in between the boiler bands. On one of the areas I'm rubbing extra hard because I want to sand through the green top coat and through the etching primer coat right back to the bare brass that the wrapper is made from. Just in case this experiment is successful, and I somehow doubt it, I'm only doing it on one of the panels. I'm being a lot more gentle on the rest of the boiler. You will of course note that I'm using the sandpaper wet. This is important for a couple of reasons in this case, the main one being the water makes the sandpaper cut better. And the other reason is this paint is only 24 hours old and it isn't fully hard, because don't forget it's a very thick coat. Some of the principles that I'm showing in this video I would use if I was repairing old paintwork, where the original paintwork was either worn, faded or physically damaged. I did a lot of that sort of thing on my 4.5-inch scale Showman's engine, and most of the paintwork repairs on the Showman's engine are quite invisible. I'm increasing the speed of the footage on this video just to get through it. I don't know about you, but it's not my idea of fun watching someone rubbing down a model boiler in real time. In this clip I've turned the boiler round, it's not too bad at this side, but back to the original side, it's diabolical. I'm going to try an experiment that I don't think is going to work. This green paint is synthetic enamel, and I'm spraying etching primer over the top of it. But there's nothing to lose. If the etching primer does blister the paint, it doesn't matter, as I'll probably remove it anyway. But after 3 very quick, very light coats, the reaction between the grey etching primer and the green paint was minimal. I got a good reaction though between the green paint and the etching primer by using a cloth soaked in gun wash, which is cellulose thinners or lacquer thinner. And now it looks a real mess. Where should I go from here? I decided to try this method, and at this stage I have no idea if it's going to work. I'm applying some etching primer very carefully with a paintbrush. The problem area is where the green paint meets the etching primer. The solvent in the etching primer will attack the paint at this point. So I'm trying my best just to paint the brass part. If the etching primer on the brush touches the etching primer on the boiler, that's not going to be an issue. It is the junction between the green paint and the etching primer that would be the problem. The easiest way to do this job is to remove the paint from the boiler entirely and start again. Here I'm applying a second coat of etching primer, because when I gently rub down the brush painted etching primer I don't want to remove it. The only problem is, if you don't leave sufficient time between the coats, the second coat of brushed on etching primer removes the first one. It's all down to applying just the right amount of paint and only doing one pass. It's quite warm in the workshop today for a change, and the etching primer is drying quite quickly. Now I need to leave this part for 24 hours before I go any further, so it's into the outer part of the workshop and I'm going to spray the running boards. I've already sprayed them with etching primer, and I sprayed the etching primer over the original old paint on the running boards because most of it was in quite good condition. And even where the old paint was chipped, there was no reaction between the etching primer and the old paint. It's down to time. If paint's been on something for a long time, it's less likely to be attacked by other paints going on top. That's why normally when I paint things, I leave them for quite a while between coats. And in between the coats I normally would rub the part down. But as that breaks through the harder outer shell of the paint, you're much more likely to get a reaction with a second coat. Once you've completed quite a long rubbing down session, fight the urge not to paint it immediately with another coat. I would recommend leaving the newly sanded paint maybe for a couple of days for it to harden. The paint on the running boards, by the way, is this stuff, HMG Paints Black Satin. And that's it for the painting experiment for the moment. You'll see how the boiler looks a couple of episodes from now. It can't look any worse than it does. That's it from me. Stay healthy, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.